The space station orbiting Earth's moon gleamed like a silver star against the black backdrop of space. Inside, Commander Nathan Kelly stared at the holographic display with growing concern. The red dots representing unknown vessels had appeared at the edge of human space 2 days ago. Now, there were more of them, moving with clear purpose toward the outer colonies. "How many ships?" Nathan asked, his voice steady despite the worry building in his chest. 53 confirmed, sir," replied Lieutenant Frank Miller, matching no known friendly signatures. Nathan nodded slowly. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for 50 years now, but they remained minor players. Earth maintained embassies and trade agreements with a dozen alien species, but humans were viewed as newcomers. Weak newcomers. The communication panel chimed. "Commander, we have an emergency transmission from Ambassador Carter." The screen flickered to life, showing a gray-haired man with deep lines of stress etched into his face. "Commander Kelly, the Kralgari Empire has formally declared war on Earth and all human colonies. Their ambassador delivered the message 20 minutes ago before departing their embassy." Nathan felt his stomach drop. The Kralgari were one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in known space. Their empire spanned hundreds of worlds, and their military technology was centuries ahead of Earth's. "On what grounds, sir?" "They claim we've been mining in contested systems. It's a lie, of course. They want our resources, plain and simple. They've always viewed us as easy targets." Nathan turned back to the display. "Those ships are heading toward New Eden Colony. They'll be there in 3 days." Ambassador Carter nodded grimly. "The President has ordered all military personnel to emergency stations. The Security Council is meeting at Lunar Base Alpha in 6 hours. You're expected to attend." The transmission ended, and Nathan immediately began issuing orders. Around him, the command center erupted into controlled chaos as officers prepared for war. 4 hours later, a small transport shuttle docked at Lunar Base Alpha. Nathan was surprised to see a woman in a civilian lab coat being escorted by 4 armed guards. Her badge identified her as Dr. Olivia Grant, Science Division. He didn't recognize her, but the security clearance level on her badge was higher than his own. The meeting room was filled with Earth's highest-ranking military officers by the time President Allison Clark entered. Her face was grim but determined. "Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the Kralgari Empire has declared war on humanity. Their fleet will reach our colonies within days. I won't sugarcoat this. Their military force vastly outmatches our conventional defenses." Admiral Peter Wright, head of the Earth Defense Force, stood. "Madam President, even with all Allied ships, we cannot repel a full-scale Kralgari invasion. We should consider immediate evacuation of the outer colonies." The President nodded slowly. "Begin evacuations, but we're not surrendering any territory." She turned to Dr. Grant, who had been sitting silently at the end of the table. "Doctor, I believe it's time." Dr. Grant stood, her eyes scanning the room. "Most of you don't know me or what my team has been working on for the past 20 years. That was intentional." She pressed a button on her tablet, and a holographic image appeared above the table. It showed what looked like a standard Earth battleship, but with subtle differences Nathan couldn't quite identify. "Project Prometheus has been completely classified, unknown even to our alien allies," Dr. Grant continued. "We've been developing this technology since before we made first contact." Nathan looked closer at the image. "What exactly are we looking at, Doctor?" Dr. Grant's eyes met his. "The most devastating weapon humans have ever created, Commander. And the Kralgari have no idea it exists." Admiral Wright leaned forward. "Will it be enough to stop them?" Dr. Grant's smile was small but confident. "They believe they're hunting sheep, Admiral. They're about to discover they've provoked wolves." 3 days passed quickly. The skies above New Eden Colony turned red with fire as the first Kralgari warships entered orbit. Their weapons cut through the planet's defensive shields like they were made of paper. Lieutenant Susan Martinez guided her evacuation shuttle through thick smoke, the vessel packed with terrified civilians. Two children cried in the back while their mother tried to comfort them. Susan's hands gripped the controls tightly as explosions rocked the ground nearby. "This is HFY 7, requesting immediate clearance," she called into her comm unit. "HFY 7, you are cleared for emergency departure. Get those people out of there," came the strained reply. Susan punched the thrusters, and the shuttle rose shakily into the atmosphere. Through the viewport, she could see 3 more colonies burning. The defense platforms, humanity's best technology, had been destroyed in the opening minutes of the attack. In orbit, 5 Earth military vessels fired desperately at a single Kralguri cruiser. Their weapons barely dented its shields. Susan watched in horror as the alien ship released a pulse of energy that cut 2 human ships in half. On the bridge of the EDF Valiant, Admiral Peter Wright received reports of similar attacks on 2 other colony worlds. His face was ashen as casualty numbers scrolled across his screen. "Sir, we've lost contact with New Horizon Colony," his communications officer reported. "The Kralguri have landed ground forces." Wright closed his eyes briefly. "Tell Captain Rodriguez to pull back. We can't hold this system." The main screen flickered, and a tall reptilian figure appeared. Its scales were deep purple, with eyes that glowed yellow and a face that seemed designed for aggression. "I am Commander Zorthal of the Kralguri Empire," the alien announced. "Your pathetic resistance is noted and dismissed. Surrender now, and we may allow your species to survive as servants." Admiral Wright straightened his uniform. "This is Admiral Wright of Earth. We do not recognize your claim to our territories, and will not surrender." The alien made a sound like stones grinding together, a laugh. "You have no choice, human. Your ships are toys compared to ours. Already 3 of your worlds burn." The transmission cut off abruptly. Wright turned to his second-in-command. "Get me the President." At Lunar Base Alpha, President Clark stood with Dr. Grant in a secure underground facility. Dozens of technicians worked at stations around them, preparing systems that had never been used outside of tests. "The Kralguri have attacked 3 colonies simultaneously," President Clark said, looking at the latest reports. "Thousands dead already. Admiral Wright is coordinating evacuations, but our conventional forces can't stop their advance." Dr. Grant nodded grimly. "We're ready to deploy Prometheus. How many pilots do we have?" 7 are fully trained and certified. 23 more are in the final stages of preparation. President Clark frowned. "Only 7 against an empire." "7 is all we need for the first phase," Dr. Grant replied. She led the president to a sealed door at the back of the facility. After passing through multiple security checkpoints, they entered a chamber where 7 men and women sat in specialized chairs, their eyes closed. Each wore a sleek helmet with pulsing blue lights. "Captain Eric Daniels," Dr. Grant said, indicating a man in his 30s with a scar across his cheek. "Our first successful neural link pilot. He's been training for this moment for 8 years." Dr. Kevin Powell approached with a tablet. "The ships are in position, Dr. Grant. All systems green." "What exactly will they be able to do?" the president asked. Dr. Grant's eyes gleamed. "The Kralguri believe they know the limits of human capability. They think our ships are slow, our reactions predictable. They've calculated our weapons' strength and our hull's weakness." She turned to look at the pilots. "They have no idea what they're about to face." In space near Jupiter, 7 ordinary-looking Earth vessels drifted silently. From the outside, they appeared to be standard military ships, the kind the Kralguri had destroyed with ease at the colonies. Inside each vessel, something unprecedented was happening. The ship's cores pulsed with strange energy as neural interfaces activated. Captain Eric Daniels opened his eyes at Lunar Base Alpha. Miles away, his consciousness merged with his ship, becoming one with its systems. He felt the engines as if they were his own muscles. The sensors became his eyes, the weapons his hands. He smiled. The hunt was about to begin. Dr. Grant and Dr. Powell watched the neural activity monitors with intense focus. The 7 pilots lay still in their chairs, but their minds were now light years away, merged with their ships. Neural synchronization at 98%, Dr. Powell reported. Better than in any test run. Dr. Grant nodded, her eyes fixed on Captain Daniels' readings. The real-world threat must be sharpening their focus. 20 years earlier, Dr. Grant had been a young researcher studying unusual patterns in human brainwaves. She discovered that humans could form unique neural connections with advanced computer systems, connections no alien species had demonstrated. It was a small thing, almost overlooked in humanity's rush to join the galactic community. But she had seen the potential. If humans could truly merge their consciousness with machines, the possibilities were endless. The military implications were obvious. Now, on a display screen above them, they watched as the 7 Prometheus ships approached the Kralguri fleet near Saturn. To outside observers, they looked like standard Earth vessels on a suicide mission. In the pilot chamber, Captain Eric Daniels' body remained motionless, but his mind soared through space. He felt every part of his ship as if it were his own body. The neural interface translated his thoughts into actions faster than any manual control could allow. The lead Kralguri battleship detected the approaching Earth vessels and fired a warning shot. Incoming energy signature, Eric thought, and instantly his ship responded, moving with impossible speed. The Kralguri weapon missed by kilometers. Commander Zorthal stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the small group of Earth ships with amusement. They send only 7 vessels to challenge us, he said to his second-in-command. The humans are more foolish than we believed. Sir, there's something strange about their movement patterns, the tactical officer reported, leaning forward to study his screens. They're moving faster than human ships should be capable of. Zorthal waved a clawed hand dismissively. A minor improvement in their engines, nothing more. Destroy them and continue to Earth. The Kralguri ships fired in unison, a wall of energy that should have vaporized the human vessels instantly. But the Prometheus ships moved in ways that defied normal physics, twisting and turning with precision no human pilot could manage. Not a single shot connected. In the neural chamber, Eric smiled as he felt the power flowing through his ship. He thought of the weapons systems, and they activated instantly. Target their main power relays. He communicated to the other pilots through the neural network. Their ships responded as one, each finding perfect firing positions around the much larger Kralguri vessels. The Earth ships fired. The shots were nothing special, standard human weapons technology. But they hit with impossible precision, striking exactly the same spot on a Kralguri battleship's shield in rapid succession. The shield collapsed in a way the Kralguri engineers had thought impossible. On his flagship, Commander Zorthal stood in shock as the largest ship in his fleet went dark, its main power core disabled by precision strikes. "How is this possible?" he hissed. "Scan those ships. What technology are they using?" "Sir, scan shows standard human technology. Nothing we haven't seen before," his science officer replied, confusion evident in his voice. "But their movement patterns, it's like they're predicting our attacks before we make them." At Lunar Base Alpha, President Clark watched the battle with wide eyes. "Those are our standard weapons." Dr. Grant nodded. "The weapons are unchanged. The ships are mostly standard design with reinforced structural elements and enhanced power systems. The difference is the control system." She pointed to the pilots. "The human mind is the weapon, Madam President. Our pilots become the ships. They react at the speed of thought, not the speed of manual controls." On the screen, they watched as the 7 Prometheus ships moved in perfect coordination, systematically disabling the weapons on 3 more Kralguri vessels. 20 years ago, Dr. Grant continued, we discovered that humans have a unique neurological pattern that allows for this kind of integration. We've kept it secret even from our alien allies. The Kralguri are seeing it for the first time. Dr. Powell looked up from his console. Captain Daniels is requesting permission to demonstrate the full capabilities of his ship. Dr. Grant glanced at the president, who nodded. "Permission granted, Dr. Grant said. In space, Captain Daniels' ship began to change. Panels shifted, revealing hidden weapon systems. The engine configuration altered, allowing for even greater maneuverability. What had appeared to be a standard Earth vessel transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before. Captain Eric Daniels felt his ship transform around him. Hidden weapon ports opened along the hull. The engines reconfigured, doubling their output. In his mind, he could feel every new system activating, becoming part of him. The Kralgari fleet responded immediately, all ships turning their weapons toward the transforming Earth vessel. But Eric was already moving, his ship dancing between energy beams with impossible grace. He targeted the nearest Kralgari battle cruiser, a massive ship that dwarfed his own. In a conventional battle, attacking such a vessel alone would be suicide. But Eric wasn't fighting a conventional battle. His weapons fired in perfect sequence, each shot building on the damage of the last. The Kralgari shields flickered and failed. Eric's next volley struck the ship's command center with surgical precision. The battle cruiser went dark, drifting helplessly in space. All this happened in less than 30 seconds. On the Kralgari flagship, Commander Zorthal watched in stunned silence. His tactical officer's hands trembled over the controls. Sir, the human ship, its response time is impossible. No pilot could react that quickly. Zorthal's eyes narrowed. Are they using artificial intelligence? Our intelligence said humans rejected combat AI after the Proxima disaster. No AI signatures detected, sir, but the ship's movements. They're organic, almost instinctive. On the main screen, they watched as the other 6 Earth ships began to transform as well, revealing their true forms. The Kralgari fleet, which had been advancing confidently toward Earth, halted. At Lunar Base Alpha, Lieutenant Samantha Wright entered the neural pilot chamber. She had been in training for 3 years, but had never linked with an actual combat vessel. Now, Dr. Grant was preparing her station. We need to deploy more ships, Dr. Grant explained to President Clark. Captain Daniels has proven the system works in actual combat. Samantha lay back in the neural chair, trying to calm her racing heart. The technicians placed the neural interface on her head, and she closed her eyes. Focus on your breathing, Dr. Powell instructed. Remember your training. Let your mind expand. Become the ship. Samantha felt the familiar sensation of her consciousness stretching, reaching out beyond her physical body. Then suddenly, she was there, in space, inside her ship. She could feel its power, its weapons, its shields. Every system became an extension of her body. And she wasn't alone. She could sense the other pilots nearby, a network of human minds linked across space. Captain Daniels' presence was strongest, his experience guiding the others. In the diplomatic wing of Lunar Base Alpha, the Kralgari ambassador demanded an emergency meeting with Earth officials. His scaled face showed a mixture of rage and fear. Your forces are using illegal technology, he accused, pointing a clawed finger at Earth's diplomatic representative. No species may use sentient AI in warfare. It is forbidden by galactic treaty. Ambassador Carol Lee kept her face neutral. I assure you, we are using no artificial intelligence in our defense systems. Then explain how your ships move like that, how they coordinate their attacks with such precision. I'm afraid I don't have that information, she replied smoothly. Our military operations are not shared with the diplomatic corps during active conflicts. The Kralgari ambassador hissed in frustration. In orbit around Jupiter, the first wave of Prometheus ships had now engaged the entire Kralgari advance fleet. What should have been a quick victory for the alien armada had become a confused battle. The human ships moved too quickly, reacted too perfectly, coordinated too precisely. Back at Lunar Base Alpha, Dr. Grant explained the reality to the president and military leaders. You see, the weapon isn't the ships themselves, she said, gesturing to the neural pilots. The weapon is the human mind. Our pilots don't just control their vessels, they become them. Every human instinct, every creative thought, every emotional reaction is translated into ship movement, and combat strategy at the speed of thought. Admiral Wright stared at the battle displays in amazement. The Kralgari think we've developed some new technology. Dr. Grant smiled. But we haven't. We've simply found a way to use what humans have always had. Our minds. Something about human neural patterns allows this connection in ways other species can't replicate. We tested it with voluntary members of 5 allied species. None could achieve even basic neural linking. On the main screen, they watched as a small group of Prometheus ships drove back the Kralgari from the colony world of New Eden. Lieutenant Samantha Wright's ship led the counterattack, moving with growing confidence as she adjusted to her new capabilities. For the first time since the war began, humanity had hope. News of the successful defense of New Eden spread quickly through human space. For the first time in weeks, people allowed themselves to hope. Videos of the transformed ships dancing around Kralgari vessels were shown on every screen. The Kralgari were not pleased. In their war council, Commander Zorthal faced difficult questions from his superiors. "We must capture one of these ships," said Grand Admiral Vexcor, leader of all Kralgari military forces. His ancient scales were dull with age, but his eyes burned with intensity. "We need to understand this technology." Zorthal bowed his head. "I have already ordered special forces to focus on disabling rather than destroying the human vessels." In Earth's command center, Admiral Wright studied the latest battle reports. The Kralgari had changed tactics, now targeting only specific parts of the Prometheus ships rather than trying to destroy them outright. "They're trying to capture our technology," he told Dr. Grant. She nodded, her face serious. "That cannot happen. If they discover the neural interface system, they'll focus everything on finding a way to block it." Admiral Wright turned to his communications officer. "Send word to all Prometheus pilots. If their ships are disabled beyond recovery, Protocol Omega is authorized." Protocol Omega. Self-destruct rather than allow capture. All pilots had agreed to this when joining the program. Major John Peterson led a team of Special Forces soldiers aboard a Prometheus ship piloted by Lieutenant Samantha Wright. Their mission: destroy a Kralgari research facility that intelligence suggested was working on countermeasures against human ships. As they approached the Kralgari outpost, Samantha felt something strange through her neural link. "Something's wrong," she said, her voice echoing through the ship's communication system. "They're waiting for us." Major Peterson checked his weapon. "How many?" "At least 3 warships hiding behind the moon. They're setting a trap." In a conventional battle, they would have had to retreat and report back. But this was not a conventional force. Samantha reached out through the neural network, connecting with 2 other Prometheus ships patrolling nearby. Without speaking a word, she coordinated a new plan. When the Kralgari ships moved to spring their trap, they found themselves caught between 3 Prometheus vessels, attacking from directions they hadn't expected. The battle was brief and decisive. Back at Lunar Base Alpha, Dr. Grant reviewed medical scans of the active neural pilots with growing concern. She pointed to several readings on Captain Daniel's brain activity. "His neural patterns are showing signs of strain," she told Dr. Powell. "The interface wasn't designed for such prolonged use." Dr. Powell studied the data. All the pilots are showing similar symptoms, though not as severe as Daniel's. "What are the potential side effects?" "Mood changes, aggression, possibly hallucinations if it gets worse," she replied. "We need to develop a modified interface to reduce the strain." On the main screen above them, they watched the battle unfolding at Proxima Centauri, a key human colony that had fallen early in the war. Captain Lisa Howard led a fleet of 15 Prometheus ships in an offensive to reclaim it. Her tactics were brilliant, using the neural interface to coordinate movements that no traditional fleet could match. Ships moved in perfect harmony, attacking from multiple vectors simultaneously, then regrouping faster than the Kralgari could respond. Word of Captain Howard's victory at Proxima spread quickly through the galaxy. Other alien species watched with growing interest and alarm. Rumors began to circulate about humans having evolved as natural war minds. beings whose brains were uniquely suited for combat. The Kralgari Empire found itself on the defensive for the first time in centuries. 3 of their colony worlds now faced human fleets. Their allies began to distance themselves, unwilling to face this unexpected human advantage. In his quarters, Captain Eric Daniels stared at his reflection in the mirror. He hadn't slept in 3 days. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt like he was still in his ship, still fighting. His hands shook slightly. "Captain," a voice called from outside his door. "Dr. Grant wants to see all pilots for medical evaluation." Eric sighed and straightened his uniform. He wouldn't tell them about the voices he sometimes heard, or how he felt angry all the time now. They needed him too much. The war was finally turning in humanity's favor. He couldn't stop now, no matter the cost. Captain Eric Daniels sat in the debriefing room, staring at the wall. The other pilots spoke around him, but their voices seemed far away. In his mind, he could still feel his ship, even though he hadn't linked with it in 2 days. "Captain, are you with us?" Admiral Wright's voice cut through the fog. Eric blinked and nodded. "Yes, sir. Sorry." Dr. Grant watched him with concern. She had seen the latest brain scans. The neural interface was changing his brain chemistry in ways they hadn't predicted. The same was happening to all the pilots, but Eric had logged the most hours linked to his ship. "As I was saying," Admiral Wright continued, "we've pushed the Kralgari back from 3 colony worlds. Their main fleet has retreated to their core systems." Lieutenant Samantha Wright smiled. "They didn't expect us to be able to fight back." "Don't get overconfident," the Admiral warned. "Our intelligence suggests they're developing new weapons specifically designed to counter the Prometheus ships." Dr. Powell entered the room and handed Dr. Grant a tablet. She read it quickly, her face growing pale. "What is it?" President Clark asked. "The Kralgari have deployed a new type of energy field in the Ta-City system," Dr. Grant explained. "It appears designed to disrupt neural interfaces." The room fell silent. Their advantage might not last much longer. Later that day, Captain Daniels walked through the corridors of Lunar Base Alpha. His head pounded with pain, and twice he thought he saw movement in the shadows. Hallucinations, just as Dr. Grant had warned might happen. He turned a corner and nearly collided with Dr. Powell. "Captain, I've been looking for you," the scientist said. "We've developed a modified neural interface that might reduce the mental strain." Eric rubbed his temples. "Will it affect performance?" "It might slightly reduce response time, but the trade-off is worth it. The current interface is damaging your brain, Captain." Eric laughed, a harsh sound that made Dr. Powell step back. "We're winning a war, Doctor. A little brain damage seems like a small price." Dr. Powell's face showed clear concern. "Captain, we need you healthy for the long term. This war won't end quickly." Before Eric could respond, alarms blared throughout the base. Both men ran to the command center. On the main screen, they saw Lieutenant Wright's ship surrounded by 5 Kralgari vessels near Ta-City. The human ship moved sluggishly, its responses delayed. "The neural disruption field is working," Dr. Grant said, her voice tight with worry. "Lieutenant Wright's connection to her ship is breaking down." They watched helplessly as the Kralgari vessels fired precision shots, disabling the Prometheus ship's engines. A boarding craft approached. "Activate Protocol Omega," Admiral Wright ordered. The communications officer sent the command, but there was no response from Lieutenant Wright's ship. The neural disruption had affected all systems. "We have to assume the Kralgari will capture that ship and its neural interface technology," President Clark said grimly. Dr. Grant shook her head. "Even if they capture the hardware, they won't understand how to use it. Their brains don't work like ours." On the council table, a map showed the positions of all human and Kralgari forces. Despite recent victories, humanity remained outnumbered and outgunned in conventional weapons. The Prometheus ships had given them a fighting chance, but with the Kralgari developing countermeasures, that advantage might disappear. "We need more pilots," Admiral Wright said. And we need to expand the program. Dr. Grant looked troubled. The neural link causes psychological trauma. The more pilots we add, the more people we put at risk of permanent brain damage. President Clark closed her eyes briefly, weighing the moral cost against the potential extinction of humanity. When she opened them, her decision was made. Begin recruiting more pilots, she ordered. And Dr. Powell, fast-track that modified interface. In his quarters, Captain Daniels stared at his shaking hands. The headaches were getting worse. Sometimes he heard voices speaking in alien languages. Sometimes he felt like he was still in space, fighting. But tomorrow, he would link with his ship again. Humanity needed him. He would hold on a little longer, even as his mind slowly came apart. The Kralgari Emperor Zexrol stood on his palace balcony, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, human ships were pushing back his forces, using technology his scientists couldn't explain. For the first time in his long life, he felt fear. "Your Majesty," his aide announced, "the human ambassador has arrived." The Emperor turned, his scales shifting from angry red to a more neutral blue. "Show them in." Ambassador Carol Lee entered the Grand Hall, her small human form dwarfed by the massive architecture. She bowed respectfully. "Emperor Zexrol, I bring a message from Earth." The Emperor studied her carefully. "You come to discuss terms of our surrender." Ambassador Lee's face remained neutral. "No, Your Majesty. Earth offers peace talks. An end to this conflict with no further bloodshed." The Emperor made a sound between a laugh and a hiss. "You surprise me, human. Your forces have won several battles, yet you offer peace rather than pressing your advantage. Is your weapon not as effective as it appears? War benefits neither of our peoples," the ambassador replied simply. The Emperor nodded slowly. "I will consider your offer. Return tomorrow for my answer." After the human left, the Emperor turned to his war minister. "Is everything ready?" "Yes, Your Majesty. While the humans wait for your peace decision, our main fleet will launch a direct assault on Earth itself. Our scientists have developed improved disruption fields that should neutralize their special ships." The Emperor's scales rippled with satisfaction. The humans think they can challenge the Kralgari Empire and then dictate terms. They will learn otherwise. On a small Earth intelligence ship near the Kralgari homeworld, Officer Ryan Campbell monitored communications carefully. When he intercepted the transmission about the planned attack, he immediately sent an emergency message to Earth. "Peace talks are a diversion," he reported. "Massive Kralgari fleet preparing to attack Earth directly. New disruption technology mentioned." At Lunar Base Alpha, the message caused immediate alarm. President Clark called an emergency meeting of military and scientific leaders. "How long do we have?" she asked Admiral Wright. "Based on the intelligence, 3 days at most. They're gathering their entire fleet for this attack. Over 300 warships." Dr. Grant looked grim. "Our current neural interface pilots can't handle that many ships, even with their enhanced capabilities." Dr. Powell stepped forward. "We've been working on something new. A way to link multiple pilots to control larger vessels. The combined neural power could overcome the disruption fields." "Is it ready?" President Clark asked. "It's untested," Dr. Powell admitted. "The mental strain would be extreme." All eyes turned to Captain Daniels, who had been silent during the meeting. Despite his deteriorating condition, he remained their most experienced pilot. "I'll do it," he said without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." Lieutenant Wright and Major Peterson immediately volunteered as well. For the next 48 hours, Earth prepared for the coming battle. Civilian populations were moved to underground shelters. Every available ship was brought to defensive positions near Jupiter, creating humanity's last line of defense. If Earth fell, the human race might not survive. In the neural interface chamber, Dr. Grant and Dr. Powell worked frantically to prepare the new multi-pilot system. "The risk is enormous," Dr. Grant told Captain Daniels as she adjusted his interface. "Your minds will be connected not just to the ship, but to each other. No one knows what that will do to your psyche." Daniels looked at Lieutenant Wright and Major Peterson in their nearby chairs. We understand the risks. Earth is worth it. The three pilots lay back as the new interfaces were activated. Their minds reached out, touching not just their ships but each other's consciousness. Daniels gasped as he felt Wright's determination and Peterson's steady courage blend with his own thoughts. Together, they became something new, a collective mind with three distinct parts. Their single massive ship, the largest Earth had ever built, powered up in orbit around Jupiter. It contained the firepower of 20 normal vessels, but required the combined mental strength of 3 pilots to control. President Clark addressed all of humanity in what might be her final speech. Her words were broadcast to every colony, every ship, every shelter. "Today we face our greatest challenge," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "The Kralgari come not just to conquer, but to end us. They have not learned what we truly are. Humanity's greatest strength has never been our technology or our weapons. It has always been our spirit, our will to survive, to protect each other, to face impossible odds and still stand firm." As she spoke, the first Kralgari ships appeared at the edge. The massive Kralgari fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel near Jupiter. 300 warships formed a wall of metal and energy, advancing toward Earth, their weapons charged, ready to end the human threat forever. Waiting for them was the combined Earth defense fleet. 50 conventional ships formed the outer line. Behind them floated 20 Prometheus vessels, their pilots linked and ready. And at the center was the new flagship, 3 times larger than any human ship ever built, controlled by the joined minds of Captain Daniels, Lieutenant Wright, and Major Peterson. Neural disruption fields detected, Dr. Powell reported from Lunar Base Alpha. The Kralgari have improved the technology. Standard Prometheus ships are showing connection instability. Dr. Grant monitored the readings from the 3 linked pilots. The multi-consciousness connection is holding. Their combined minds are resisting the disruption. The Kralgari fleet opened fire, a wall of energy streaking across space. The human conventional ships took heavy damage, but the Prometheus vessels danced through the barrage, their movements still fluid despite the disruption fields. In the neural control chamber, Captain Daniels felt his mind touching those of Wright and Peterson. Together, they guided their massive ship forward. The strange sensation of sharing thoughts was disorienting at first, but soon felt natural, even powerful. "Their fleet is spreading out," Peterson thought. "Trying to surround us," Wright added. Daniels focused their shared consciousness. "We need to break their formation." Their ship accelerated, moving with impossible speed for its size. The weapons fired in perfect sequence, targeting the command ships at the center of the Kralgari formation. The Emperor watched from his flagship as the battle unfolded. His scales darkened with rage as he saw the human ships moving with that unnatural coordination, even through his improved disruption fields. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. His science officers studied the readings. The large human vessel is emitting strange neural patterns, multiple signatures, somehow acting as one. As the battle raged, Dr. Grant made a startling discovery. The neural patterns of the 3 linked pilots were creating something new, a consciousness that was more than the sum of its parts. "Look at this," she told President Clark, pointing to the brainwave patterns. "They're not just sharing thoughts. They're building on each other's ideas instantaneously, creating strategies no single mind could devise." On the battlefield, the human ships began to move in ways that bewildered the Kralgari commanders. Rather than predictable attack patterns, they seemed to act with creative inspiration, adapting and changing tactics faster than the aliens could respond. Captain Daniels felt a strange clarity as his mind flowed together with the others. He could access Wright's intuition and Peterson's strategic thinking. Together, they saw possibilities that had never occurred to any of them alone. "We need to show them," Daniels thought to the others, "not just defeat them." The others understood immediately. Their ship changed course, targeting the Kralgari Emperor's flagship, not to destroy it, but to isolate it. 20 minutes later, the battle had turned decisively. A third of the Kralgari fleet was disabled, their systems disrupted by precisely targeted human attacks. The remaining ships formed a protective ring around their Emperor's vessel, which now faced the human flagship directly. Dr. Grant gasped as she realized what was happening. They're not just fighting tactically. They're communicating emotionally through their actions. The Kralgari Emperor watched in disbelief as his grand fleet faltered before the human ships. Centuries of Kralgari military superiority meant nothing against these strangely coordinated vessels. "Open a channel to the human ship," he ordered. On the screen, he saw not one but 3 human faces, their eyes showing the glow of neural interfaces. "Emperor Zexaral," they spoke in perfect unison. "We could destroy your fleet, but that is not our purpose." The Emperor's scales shifted nervously. "What is your purpose, then?" The 3 humans smiled, a gesture that looked strangely gentle after such fierce combat. "To show you humanity's true weapon. Not our ships or our technology. Not even our neural interfaces. Our greatest weapon is what allowed us to create all of these things, our ability to connect with each other, to build on each other's ideas, to become more together than we ever could be alone." As they spoke, the human ships formed a new pattern in space, not a battle formation, but a symbol of interconnected circles. "We offer peace again," the 3 pilots said, "not from weakness, but from understanding. The galaxy needs connection, not conquest."